Hello chess friends, this is International Master Valeri Lilov for the Remote Chess Academy, and today I'd like to talk about certain typical mistakes that people tend to do very often. And this is sort of an idea on what to do so that you don't make those type of mistakes yourself, and how to exploit them, how to recognize those when your opponent makes it. You see, this is a really interesting practical subject that could definitely be very interesting to many chess players from different levels. So we're going to see now a game that was played between two very strong players, Richard Tredi and Josero Capablanca. That game was played in Berlin in 1928, and it is a very instructive example of strangely enough, a common mistake that happens between intermediate or beginner players. So Redi, one of the most famous grandmasters at that time, started the game with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5, which is the real Lopez. Everybody knows that this is a very famous opening, a popular system of playing. So basically, right after that, Black played a d6, and after c3, there was a6. This approach to the real Lopez is fairly interesting, actually. I have to say, the main idea of it is that Black gets to challenge this bishop to force it to go away, and then he could quickly focus on developing the rest of his piece, like the knight, the bishop, and castle. Essentially, on the other hand, d6, has proved easier for White to break in the center and counter. So, this is just a little bit about the opening. We haven't got to the really interesting part. An interesting part of the game goes with f5. This counterattacking system for Black is called the siesta variation. The main plan is that Black gets to attack White's center fairly quick in order to provoke certain mistakes, or eventually get to destroy the center. Of course, that's not too easy, but this is a smart and honorable attempt. So after the move of f5, White is confused. What to do? So I think that this was the first time when White actually got himself into a very confused situation. Like, he didn't really know where to go, what to think about, because there are so many moves, and the question is really what to do. Now remember the following. If you ever get confused by some move by your opponent, or certain type of idea, the one thing that you should never do is complicate. Because that's what people try. They say, okay, he's confusing me, and I'm gonna push with some nice tactic, and I'm gonna get away, and I'm gonna counter him. That's not the way. So you have to stabilize. You don't know the circumstances of their rising situation yet. You don't know what this, what this position, which is completely out of your control, could lead to. So if you complicate, you're putting yourself at a great risk. I've lost lots of games like that. So White's simple idea should have been either to exchange, which seems fair. Obviously, even if Black takes some control in the center, he just doesn't have the pieces or the development to support it. Or maybe d3 or d4 later. Or maybe just to continue with the move of d3. Either of them moves would have been quite decent, and I don't think that Black would get anything special here. What White chose to do was d4. And I think this is one thing that you have to stay away from. Do never engage in the tactics or big attacks like that, except if you're not 100% certain that this is the only way to go. Stabilize, make sure you take the moment in order to get everything in a solid position, and then you can go from there. So White violated that rule, so Black took on the e4, so White has to decide exactly where to go. Now, one of the possible ways for him to continue was knight takes d5. I guess that could have been a way to go for queen h5, and after queen h5, bishop takes the c, a couple of checks would have probably returned the material to White and leave the position very complicated. This is a mess here. I just want to say it. It would have been a very messy position where Black is a bishop ahead, but White probably has the perpetual. The thing is that White didn't want that, and he wanted to win. He felt that Black is behind in development, and he said to himself, you know what? I'm not going to just go for a draw. I'm going to try to win the game. Knight g5. Is he wrong with that assessment? No. But he's wrong about one thing. One thing that people tend to do in a lot of times is to overestimate their attacks. And that happens in a pretty simple way. When it comes down to overestimating the attack, usually they think that the position and the possibilities are fantastic. They make them look like that. And you like, really, I mean, initially they look very, very good. But with the time, as the time progresses, they realize that their attack starts to fade away, one move after the other. And why is that? Okay? The reason is because the attack strength does not depend on the good look of the pieces. Now, that's one feature. But what really makes the attack successful is the possibility for the attacking player to create threats. You see, if he has the chance to create threats, he can lead the initiative. He can have that firepower, that control. If he doesn't, maybe we can say he has good prospects, but not that he has a strong attack. And that's what I think White overestimated. He thought that he would be able to create many threats in the next moves, and he was wrong. Oh yeah. After knight g5, Black just played edicts to the d4 to simplify. See, Black is using this advice. Try to simplify the position whenever you get in trouble or whenever you get into a position that is beyond your control. So edicts to the d was a good move. White had to take back on e4. And now what do? I recommend you to pause this video and think very carefully. What do you think Black has to do in this position? He's got some good moves. He's got a nice position. What's the best thing to do next? It's a good question. It's a fair example. What would you think? What would you do? Well, I know many chess players are going to take the pawn on c3, and probably that doesn't look so bad. However, if we just go for a move like that, what's going to happen is that White could take back with this knight. And then on the next move, what he could do is to concentrate on the move of knight d5. Possibly he can even focus on queen b3. And some similar opportunities will be quite decent. So, Black didn't want to do this. He had a very different idea. The idea that he decided to go for was knight f6. And that's called neutralizing. Neutralizing means to find out any of the opponent's forces that are just close to you and dangerous and deal with them. Doesn't matter that pawn right now, we just don't want to be in danger. And we will be in danger if the opponent ever gets just to set his pieces right and starts attacking against our position. Now, Black knew that very well. Oh, yes, he did. And so knight f6 was a good option. If White plays a bishop to the g5 move, perhaps I guess Black would play bishop e7, and even though White can return his pawn at some point, I believe Black would have an easy game. So White didn't. He didn't accept his mistake. He decided, whatever, I can't allow to lose this position. I have to do something, and I've got to do it quickly. So he played the move of bishop to g5, bishop e7, and queen takes d4. And now it's getting really interesting. Because yes, White seems to be very active. And yet he made one of the biggest mistakes that a player could ever make. What is that? Okay. Now, the reason why White's strategy fails from that point on isn't because his pieces are unprepared. It isn't because there's no target and there's no reason for his attack. There are good pieces and there's good reason. It fails simply because White forgot about the opponent's counterplay. And now, the critical mistake of people who tend to attack is that they rarely pause, and they rarely think about what the opponent can do in counter. Now, this is a very simple concept, and I know what you're going to say. Valerie, this is a very cliched thing. Of course I know I have to be looking at my opponent's possibilities. Now, what are you talking about? I mean, that doesn't help. Well, the thing is that we know about that concept, right? But we forget it. Especially when we are at the edge of our seat, thinking about how to attack the opponent, how to push these threats, how to do things. There comes a point in which we simply forget about anything else. It's like when you see a beautiful person and you want to talk to him and, you just don't care about anything else. That's how an attack looks like, when you are actually looking at it. And you have to remember, like in chess, well, in life, obviously there are many different things, many different important things. Now, I have to say that in chess, you have to be very objective. Like, the beautiful look of the position and the fact that you could start the pressure first, you could do some cool things, doesn't mean that you will necessarily succeed. So, keep in mind, on the top of your mind, set a priority over your opponent's counter possibilities every time when you attack. This is important. Because after b5, knight takes f6, g takes f6, well, I thought that he's great. I mean, sometimes the mind is going to make tricks on you because it will tell you, I'm great. Look at that. The knight's attacked, the king is bad, this is like a dancing position. You know what's a dancing position? Dancing position is a position where you feel like you can, just dance. It's so cool, right? Well, yeah, but that's just a temporary feeling. Black takes the bishop, and now you realize that it's not that easy, like really. Queen takes to c6 will be met by bishop d7, and it looks like black is going to win the bishop. Now, hold on for a second. White's got his own resources, you'll say. He's got bishop h6. He wants to trap down the rook and keep up with some serious tactics on the c6 and h5. Well, it looks like White keeps dancing. He wants to force more threats against black's position. Okay? Now, of course, black chooses to defend. Now, not bishop d7, as this will be a checkmate, so he plays queen d7. And white simply castles. Now, I know what you're going to think about. You're going to think about bishop g7 as a move like with which white could have done this. But then black would just exchange the queens, and as a result of the bishop takes h8, he traps the bishop. Next move, there will be rook takes h8, and that's quite hopeless. I mean, white will have a rook for two bishops, which don't look anything special now, but trust me, in a few moves, when black gets to find to open them, it's going to be scary. So white chose to play short castles. Now he's still hoping that his attack will be great. Bishop g7, long castles, and then bishop takes h8. Well, I guess white sort of decided that maybe in the end he was wrong. He didn't estimate the black counterattack, and he didn't think about the fact that he just doesn't have enough forces. One of the biggest mistakes that white ever made was that he thought he could be successful with only two pieces. And indeed, two pieces could do a lot of damage. But not when they are fighting 5 pieces of the opposite side. That doesn't work. And that's exactly the problem that white experiences with knight e5. So, he really didn't like the position, so he played queen d1. I mean, what? There's nothing else to do. He's stable at least, and maybe if black captures this bishop, white could do knight d2 and, I don't know, hope for something, f3 to block the bishop, and not that it's a great game, but yeah, it feels like he's okay. Now, what would you like to do in this position if you're black? Just take a moment here and think. What would you like to do if you have that situation? Would you just want to take the bishop or not? What do you think? Well, I guess you've already figured out that if I'm asking that question, it's probably not going to be taking the bishop, because otherwise I wouldn't have asked a question like that. You see, and that's kind of important, because really, I mean, this bishop, it looks the simplest, and you're going to say, Valerie, you told us that we have to think about the simple move, so why not just take the bishop? Because, you see, when you are attacking, one of the secrets that you have to keep in mind lies within the forcing moves. See, when white started his attack, as a plan, I mean, he never really had these threats to put against the opponent. And the threats are the nature of the attack. They prove how good or not that good a certain attack is. So I say, in order to pose enough problems against the opponent, you need to consider the so-called forcing moves. They happen to be checks, captures, or direct threats. Whichever you choose, you'll always make your opponent to stay on the backside and defend himself. Just like what black did with bishop f3. Probably that was one of the best moves to happen, simply because if white retreats, we see that now there's no f3 anymore. The g2 attack is happening, and most likely a checkmate. That's quite bad. So if white takes the bishop, then we get queen h3. And it's incredible. The knight takes f3, wins the queen, and there's a checkmate. It's kind of amazing also for one more reason, and that's like the fact that, within the final position after bishop f3, like before white takes it, this move, I mean, some of you ask, how do I see such a move? And true, it's not easy to see it. But these are the kinds of moves that you can find when you purposefully ask yourself the question, what are the forcing moves that I have in a given position? Then not always they will be there, not always they'll work, but if you at least ask yourself like that and you check for any good forcing moves or any possibilities to follow them up, then you will know. If it's not there, that's fine. You'll just continue reinforcing. You'll keep it simple. But when it's there, when it's helping, then bishop f3 works. And so black proved that white's strategy was really wrong. The choice to complicate when he didn't feel certain or secure about the circumstances of the position, the idea to attack while he was not that ready, and the fact that he failed to check black's counter-attacking opportunities. All these things really served black to counterattack white, and most importantly, it shows us what to do when the opponent begins a quick attack. You know what's the simplest solution? Stabilize, like make sure that there are no damaging threats you can make, and counter him. Don't try to counter him right away like white did in the beginning, but stabilize and counter. That's how you'll prove better developed and ultimately much more successful. It was a great game, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, especially the move of bishop f3. So it kind of teaches about a few typical mistakes that we should consider and, of course, avoid in our own, and a few typical things that we have to know and how to exploit similar things or mistakes by our opponent. Hope you enjoyed the game as much as I did, and thank you all for watching.